dia 2 de setembro de 2023. A gente caminha hoje para o encerramento da nossa ELT Week 2023. A ELT Week é uma iniciativa do British Council. Essa é a segunda edição da ELT Week no Brasil. E eu sou Alessandra Moura, sou gerente da área de programas de língua inglesa e educação básica no British Council no Brasil. E eu vou começar com a minha audiodescrição. Eu sou uma mulher de cabelos castanhos, olhos castanhos, pele clara. Hoje eu estou vestindo uma camisa branca, camisa social branca e um casaquinho azul marinho. Atrás de mim tem uma parede branca, tem também um armário cinza num cantinho, dá para ver um gradil lá também logo atrás de mim. Bom, todas as sessões do ELT Week, todas foram bilíngues, mas um bilíngue não só em inglês-português, um bilíngue em português e em Libras, língua dos sinais brasileiros. Além disso, cerca de 70% das nossas sessões foram trilíngues. Então, a gente também trouxe a língua inglesa, né? Todas as sessões ficarão gravadas até o dia 15 de setembro e até lá você pode se inscrever para ter acesso ao conteúdo que os palestrantes disponibilizaram e também para pedir o seu certificado de participação, sua declaração de participação. Vocês vão receber um e-mail com todas as instruções para poder obter esses dois benefícios adicionais da ELT Week. Bom, o objetivo do British Council em fazer a ELT Week, e em 2022 fizemos em parceria com o Ministério da Educação, está toda gravada e transmitida pelo canal do MEC no YouTube, e este ano também as sessões estão no canal do MEC do YouTube. O objetivo é contribuir para o ensino de língua inglesa de uma forma mais equitativa, mais equidade e com mais qualidade. O British Council foi responsável pela curadoria dos conteúdos, então nós selecionamos os temas das sessões, procuramos trazer temas atuais, temas que contribuam com a promoção da equidade no ensino da língua inglesa. Então, durante essa edição da ELT Week, tivemos 2 dias especiais sobre equidade, diversidade e inclusão. Terça-feira e quarta-feira, nós falamos sobre acessibilidade, nós tivemos sessões com alunos e com professores com baixa visão. Nós falamos sobre acessibilidade em geral, boas práticas para inclusão em sala de aula. Também falamos sobre a realidade LGBTQ+, nas escolas, trazendo tanto o ponto de vista dos estudantes como o ponto de vista dos professores, das professoras que são da comunidade. Também foi uma sessão extremamente rica, proveitosa. Todas as sessões também falamos sobre a questão racial, a questão sobre como ensinar inglês nas periferias, como trazer o contexto das periferias para dentro da sala de língua inglesa, para ajudar na adequação do contexto, né, educacional para esses estudantes. Sessão maravilhosa. Então, tivemos 2 dias dedicados a isso. Além disso, paralelamente, todo dia, às 6 da tarde, nós apresentamos a série The Future of English, que é uma pesquisa do British Council que foi lançada este ano, que tanto olha para trás, verificando se as tendências que a gente acreditava que iam acontecer com a língua inglesa realmente se realizaram, e também olha para frente, fazendo uma projeção para daqui a mais 10 anos de quais são as tendências. Tivemos 5 sessões, todas também com recortes da pesquisa, muito interessante, e a sessão de ontem foi bastante rica sobre multilinguismo. A gente discutiu a questão dos mitos na língua inglesa sobre os sotaques, né? Desmistificamos, o esforço foi esse, a proposta foi desmistificar a questão de necessidade de um ou de outro sotaque, explicando como o multilinguismo já influencia hoje o ensino da língua inglesa e como ele tende a continuar influenciando. Então, recomendo também assistir essa sessão, quem ainda não pôde acompanhar todas, muito interessante. E hoje a gente caminha para o nosso encerramento, vamos ter daqui a pouquinho uma oficina interativa com o Graham Stanley, que é o nosso diretor das Américas, e o tema vai ser, a gente vai trazer aqui um mini curso do Teaching for Success, que é a nossa arquitetura educacional para a formação continuada de professores do British Council, e ele vai trazer especificamente a temática, como o professor pode se autorresponsabilizar pelo seu desenvolvimento profissional. É uma degustação do Teaching for Success, daqui a pouquinho com o Graham, a partir das 10 horas. Antes de continuar, eu vou dar uma olhadinha no chat, que tem sido muito animado, muito ativo, para ver de onde vocês se conectam hoje. Ó, legal, tem uma turma animadíssima que tá. Olha só quanta gente num sábado. Excelente. Na verdade, a questão do sábado foi proposital. Assim como no ano passado, nós incluímos sábado. No ano passado ainda teve um feriado no meio, onde a gente teve um mini curso do Teaching for Success, porque a gente entende que a agenda de professores, especialmente de teachers, English teachers, que estão nas escolas ou estejam também em cursos de língua inglesa ou aula particulares, é uma agenda difícil, né? É uma agenda, às vezes, que envolve muita logística, muito trânsito entre um local e outro, e também é difícil a gente abrir mão, pedir para vocês abrirem mão de estar na sala de aula, para estar num momento de formação continuada. Por isso que as sessões, elas também ficarão guardadas ficarão disponíveis até o dia 15 de setembro, para facilitar. Então, o objetivo de fazer a oficina interativa com o Graham no sábado vai um pouco por essa linha, para a gente também fazer um evento acessível para os professores. Por isso também vários horários, várias grades diferentes de horários, para quem puder entrar ao vivo, poder participar, e realmente isso aconteceu bastante. Olha lá, turma de Recife já chegou, Uruguaiana, no Rio Grande do Sul, Paraná, Rio de Janeiro, minha terra, São Mateus do Maranhão, legal, como é que é? Ituiutaba, nossa, isso é difícil de falar, em Minas, muito bom, Maringá, São Leopoldo, Rio Grande do Sul, muito bom. Vejo também algumas pessoas que estão se conectando sempre com a gente. Muito bom, muito legal. Bom, enquanto vocês... Olha, Pernambuco está aqui representado, que ótimo. Então, enquanto vocês continuam povoando aí o nosso chat com todos os cantos do nosso país, eu vou trazer também para vocês um pouco de informações sobre qual foi o perfil, né, das pessoas que se inscreveram, já se inscreveram na ELT Week, e a gente entender como é que isso dialoga com o perfil no Brasil. Eu fiz esse exercício ao longo dos dias, propositalmente a gente falar sobre qual é o tamanho, né, do nosso, qual é o tamanho da nossa turma, né? Quantos English teachers existem no Brasil? Então, de acordo com o censo de 2020, a gente tem 172 mil professores de inglês no Brasil, tanto nas redes públicas quanto nas redes privadas. E desse grupo, 80,34 são mulheres. Isso dialoga com o que a gente recebeu de inscrição. Nós recebemos 81% de inscrições de mulheres, cerca de 19% de inscrições de homens, de pessoas que não se identificam nem com o gênero feminino, nem com o gênero masculino, e algumas pessoas que preferiram não informar. Além disso, no Brasil, a gente percebe que a gente não tem dados ainda consolidados o suficiente para ter certeza do perfil, porque muitas pessoas durante o censo optam por não informar. Mas os dados que temos é que no Brasil são 38,89% de pessoas brancas, English teachers, seguido de 27,68% de pardos e 4% pessoas pretas. Indígenas e outros amarelos, né? Indígenas, pessoas amarelas que se identificam com essas raças, alguma coisa perto de 2%. E por que esses dados são importantes, né? Para o British Council, esses dados são importantes e por isso que a gente inclui na ficha de inscrição, assim como depois na ficha de avaliação, são importantes para a gente entender se a gente está fazendo um evento realmente acessível para o perfil total de English Teachers no Brasil, né? E isso impacta, inclusive, na forma como a gente comunica, cria as estratégias de comunicação para contar para vocês que os eventos estão acontecendo. Isso também demonstra o quanto as secretarias de educação e os governos estão interessados e contribuindo para essa divulgação. De fato, tivemos divulgação pelo CONSET, tivemos divulgação pela Undime, várias secretarias de educação levaram especificamente para o seu professorado. E é por isso que essas informações sobre o perfil sociodemográfico são importantes para e a gente leva elas em consideração. E aí, falando um pouquinho sobre de onde estão vindo as inscrições para o ELT Week, né? A gente percebe que está meio a meio, 40% dos professores declararam que são professores em escola pública, em escola pública e 36% em escola privada. Mas a gente sabe que muitos professores dão aula nos dois segmentos, né? Então, isso é ótimo também. A gente quer muito que a gente quer ter as nossas ações que garantam que a gente tenha participantes tanto do setor público quanto do setor privado. Com relação à carinha, né, o colorido que temos no Brasil, sob o ponto de vista das regiões do Brasil, a gente teve 57% de participantes do Sudeste, Nordeste com 20,7%, Sul 11,9%, quase 12%, Centro-Oeste 5,5% e no Norte do país 4,4%. É claro que esses dados eles dão uma pista onde a gente pode melhorar ainda a divulgação, onde vale a pena vocês ainda divulgarem para os seus colegas, para os teachers, que está acontecendo, que eles podem se inscrever, podem aproveitar, ainda podem ter um certificado até dia 15, mas esses dados também são relativos à população, aonde tem mais professores de inglês, de fato, no Brasil. E é mais ou menos esse colorido que temos, né? A última informação que eu vou compartilhar com vocês é sobre aonde os professores, os teachers, dão aula de inglês, né? Quais segmentos. E isso também é um dado importante para a gente, porque isso ajuda a gente a fazer escolhas das sessões. Quais são as sessões que a gente vai priorizar, qual é o público. Na medida do possível, a gente procura ter sessões que fossem adequadas para quem dá aula, da educação infantil à universidade. Mas é claro que tem determinados temas, especialmente quando a gente está fazendo uma coleta de tema, e aí eu vou pedir para vocês contarem aqui para mim no chat sugestões de temas para ELT Week no ano que vem, tem alguns temas que são mais específicos. Então, vamos lá. 70%, quase 71% dos professores lecionam no ensino fundamental 1 e 2. 46% em cursos de idiomas, Também eu acredito que é bem provável, a gente vai fazer ainda a análise mais específica, que a gente tem um cruzamento, né, desses dados. Professores estão nas escolas e estão também nos cursos de inglês. 34% para ensino médio, 15,9% na educação infantil. Olha que dado interessante. Cada vez mais a gente percebe as secretarias de educação e as escolas fazendo um movimento para levar o inglês para os anos iniciais, né? E isso está refletido aqui nos dados que nós coletamos. 8,7% para ensino universitário e pós-graduação e 5,8% para o ensino técnico, tá? Outro dado muito interessante para a gente foi sobre o interesse na carreira de formador de formadores. Ontem nós tivemos uma sessão com John Shackleton, interativa também, sobre a carreira, o que é ser um Teacher Educator para a língua inglesa, o que é ser um formador de professores de língua inglesa. E também foi uma sessão bastante interativa, com bastante interesse, uma sessão um pouco mais longa, e de acordo com os dados que nós recebemos de vocês, com as informações, 75,5% se interessam em se tornar professores de inglês. Gente, isso é 3 em cada 4. Então, a gente também discutiu ao longo da semana sobre o quanto as tecnologias iam influenciar o trabalho dos professores de língua inglesa, e a gente conversou um pouquinho sobre as especulações que existem sobre as carreiras que vão desaparecer. Concluímos que a carreira do educador, do professor, não só não tende a desaparecer por conta das tecnologias, mas ele tende, no momento, a gente já vê um mercado mais aquecido globalmente e no Brasil também. E é claro, como a gente comentou na sessão de quarta, se eu não me engano, esse assunto foi na sessão de quarta, The Future of English, a gente sabe, entende que se existem mais professores, se existe uma demanda por mais professores de língua inglesa, quem vai formar esses professores? Porque é claro que a gente tem as universidades fazendo a formação inicial, mas e depois? A formação continuada, que a gente está vendo aqui pela ELT Week, que ela precisa ser constante, né? Existem novas metodologias, existe necessidade de retornar algumas metodologias, existem questões como a inclusão, que elas merecem ser revistas o tempo inteiro, né? Quem vai formar? Então, a gente tem um programa no British Council do Brasil que é específico para contribuir para a profissionalização da carreira dos Teacher Educators. O que eu quero dizer com profissionalização? É um certificado internacional que é chancelado pelo British Council para que os Teacher Educators que nós já temos no Brasil, ou aqueles que se interessem em caminhar por essa carreira, né? Eles tenham um certificado que internacionalmente vai ser reconhecido e que eles podem dar aulas, aproveitando o novo momento que a gente está desde a pandemia, dar aulas remotamente em qualquer lugar do mundo. A gente tem um grupo já grande do Brasil participando e tem uma ficha de inscrição na sessão de ontem do John Shackleton para vocês entrarem lá e pedir e se inscrever no mailing list dedicado para isso. A primeira ação que vai ser feita para esse grupo de pessoas interessadas na carreira do Teacher Educator, é incluí-los num grupo de WhatsApp, onde a gente posta conteúdos constantemente que podem ser tanto aproveitados pelas pessoas como professores, como podem ser repassados como Teacher Educators para os seus enfim, estudantes, né, alunos aí de Teacher Education. Olha, tem mais uns alôs aqui que eu vou dar. São Bento do Sapucaí, em São Paulo, Campo Herê, Santa Catarina, deixa eu ver, Montanha, Espírito Santo, E também temos aqui um pedido, um tema, Josélia me ouviu, pedindo ensino de inglês com metodologias ativas, por favor, tá? Ok. Se vocês tiverem outras sugestões, postem aqui pra gente, por favor, no chat. Bom, agora eu vou mergulhar no nosso tema, já fazendo um fechamento sobre o ELT Week. A gente vai começar a falar sobre o convite, né? Essa sessão a gente colocou na programação como um encerramento e um convite. O convite é o seguinte: o British Council vai desenhar um Teaching for Success, que vai começar no ano que vem, de fevereiro a março, de fevereiro a abril do ano que vem. Vão ser 10 a 12 semanas, uma dedicação de cerca de 3 horas por semana, e vamos abrir uma campanha para bolsistas. É um curso que vai ser totalmente oferecido com bolsas. Então, o convite é para que vocês fiquem de olho nas nossas redes sociais, porque nós vamos desenhar um Teaching for Success personalizado para o Brasil, para começar no ano que vem. A ideia de a gente deixar para o ano que vem é que a gente precisa de uma etapa anterior. Quem esteve presente na sessão de abertura com Graham Stanley viu um pouquinho o que é o Teaching Success, né? Eu vou pedir para a Liliana projetar aqui para mim, na tela, o framework do Teaching for Success. Acredito que vocês já estejam vendo o framework aqui. Deixa eu dar uma olhadinha no YouTube, para ver se vocês já estão vendo minha tela. Sim, beleza. Olha, o framework é a arquitetura educacional do British Council para formação continuada. Ele se baseia em... Opa, desculpa. Pronto. Ele se baseia em 12 competências necessárias são competências pedagógicas necessárias para o ensino, para o ensino, na verdade, de qualquer disciplina, tá? Mas o Teaching for Success, ele é adotado especificamente para professores de língua inglesa, mundialmente pelo British Council. Só para trazer alguns exemplos, a gente tem Teaching for Success sendo entregue no momento na China, no Oriente Médio, na Espanha, e a gente quer trazer esse conteúdo agora para o Brasil. O Teaching for Success ele é um curso que ele é entregue em inglês, em língua inglesa, principalmente, mas a gente vai preparar conteúdos paralelos também em língua portuguesa, no caso do Brasil, fazendo um curso personalizado. Isso também é bastante comum, a gente trazer um curso multilingüe nos outros lugares do mundo onde a gente entrega. Mas boa parte do conteúdo, 70% do conteúdo é todo em língua inglesa. Então, as competências são planejamento de aula, compreendendo os estudantes. Tivemos a sessão na ELT Week da Tamires Gama, exatamente sobre esse tema. Por que é importante você entender melhor o perfil dos seus estudantes e também estratégias, ferramentas para que você possa fazer essa investigação e utilizá-las depois no planejamento das suas aulas. Manejo de aula, manejo de sala de aula, né? Compreensão e domínio do conteúdo, e aí no caso da língua inglesa, usando recursos. Nós também tivemos discussões durante a ELT Week sobre o livro didático. Eu estou com a frase na cabeça de uma das teachers que escreveu assim, sobre temas, né, para o ano que vem. Como é que eu uso o livro didático e não ele me usa? Então, essa competência é sobre isso. Como explorar melhor os recursos didáticos a seu favor, claro. Avaliação de aprendizagem, né? Avaliação de aprendizagem de língua inglesa. Não só a avaliação mais tradicional, mas especialmente as avaliações processuais, que é uma tendência bem forte. E a gente hoje também tem sistemas de avaliação automáticas, né? Usando tecnologias de automação e de recomendação de conteúdo. Como integrar as tecnologias na sala de aula é outra competência. A competência seguinte é tomar responsabilidade pelo seu próprio desenvolvimento pessoal, ou seja, como você desenha o seu próprio plano de desenvolvimento profissional, mas como que você começa? Como é que você descobre aonde que você vale a pena você investir mais? O que você mais precisa de uma forma objetiva? É a oficina que a gente vai ter daqui a pouquinho com o Graham, tá? Usando técnicas de inclusão na sala de aula. Foi outro tema bem forte que tivemos aqui na ELT Week. Usar abordagens multilingües. Então, foi o tema de ontem da Amy Lightfoot, a nossa diretora de pesquisa e de insights da área de língua inglesa. A gente falou bastante ontem sobre o multilinguismo, abordagens multilingües, mas essa é uma competência também muito importante. O que seria essa abordagem multilingüe? Como você faz, por exemplo, para transitar entre o português e o inglês sem que você tenha uma perda na oportunidade de usar o inglês e de desenvolver o inglês oral dos seus alunos, mas pelo contrário, que você use o português para ajudar mais na aprendizagem. É a mesma coisa que a gente vai fazer no próprio Teaching for Success no Brasil. A gente vai trazer alguns conteúdos em português sem perder a oportunidade de ter um curso em inglês e desenvolver, enfim, todas as habilidades relacionadas à proficiência da língua. Outra competência, promoção das competências do século XXI, né? Enfim, a gente tem interessante que no Brasil a gente tem tido cada vez mais e mais recentemente uma grande discussão sobre educação integral, né? Não é educação em tempo integral somente, mas para além disso, uma educação holística, uma educação integral. Esse é um dos temas uma das competências que a gente aborda no Teaching for Success. E a outra competência é conhecendo as políticas educacionais. Na sessão da professora Gláucia Moraes, quando ela falou sobre o inglês, né, periférico para as periferias, ela trouxe a importância e ela contextualizou muito bem. Por que é importante a gente conhecer as nossas políticas educacionais como professores, como English teachers também na sala de aula? Então, essas são as 12 competências do Teaching for Success. Só que a gente vai desenhar um curso. Por que o Teaching for Success só é no ano que vem? Porque esse é um curso, uma arquitetura educacional que ela parte do princípio que a gente precisa perguntar para os participantes. Fazer perguntas para os participantes, ouvir as suas vozes e entender quais dessas competências a gente deve abordar toda vez que a gente faz o Teaching for Success. Ele é totalmente personalizado a cada uma das entregas. A gente fez uma pequena experiência. Lili, pode fechar e trazer o vídeo. A gente fez uma pequena experiência no ano passado de Teaching for Success e eu vou mostrar para vocês aqui como isso aconteceu em parceria com a Prefeitura de Salvador, com a Secretaria Municipal de Educação, e eu vou trazer 3 professores de Salvador para contar para vocês como é que foi participar do Teaching for Success que a gente fez no ano passado. Pode passar o vídeo, Lili.
Sorry, Ali, which video?
The teacher's video I sent yesterday on. A sessão com o Graham vai ser toda em espanhol. Perdão, a sessão do Graham vai ser toda em inglês. Então, vocês podem assistir tanto aqui no canal do British Council do Brasil, quanto assistir no canal das Américas em inglês, sem tradução simultânea, tá? A original. Eu mesma vou estar interagindo com o Graham, é uma oficina interativa, eu vou estar interagindo com ele em língua inglesa também. E o Graham vai estar mergulhando no Teaching for Success com na competência sobre como planejar o seu próprio desenvolvimento pessoal. Se vocês gostaram dessa exploração que eu fiz sobre todas as competências do Teaching for Success, eu recomendo que vocês assistam a sessão de abertura da ELT Week, onde o Graham explorou todas as competências e explicou como é que funciona o Teaching for Success. Deixa eu dar uma olhadinha no chat, que eu tenho mais mensagens aqui. Ok. Algumas pessoas nos canais das Américas estão perguntando sobre o link no Brasil. A gente vai postar lá para vocês o link para voltar para o canal do Brasil para assistir com a tradução simultânea. Deixa eu ver, quem mais? São Mateus do Maranhão, já tinha dado bom dia. Tô vendo a professora Gabriela Nemirovski, está participando, colega aqui de São Paulo. Deixa eu ver aqui. Pedro Regis, da Paraíba. Que legal, temos uma super parceria com a Paraíba. Norte do Paraná. Sirinhaém, de Pernambuco. Pergunta sobre qual é o período do curso. O curso vai acontecer de fevereiro a abril do ano que vem, tá? A gente vai fazer, sim, um compilado dos materiais e links mandados por todos os palestrantes ao longo da ELT Week, respondendo a Lilian, que está perguntando. Fica tranquila, não precisa organizar em pasta, porque após o dia 15 de setembro, a gente vai enviar um e-mail para todos os inscritos, tanto com o passo a passo para obter seu certificado, quanto para receber o conteúdo com todos os links e os slides que forem disponibilizados pelos palestrantes. Vários palestrantes incluíram muitos links, né? Não era fácil ir acompanhando tudo, por mais que a gente fosse postando no chat. Vamos lá. Escola de Galvão, professora Alessandra de Limoeiro, Pernambuco. Instituto Federal do Tocantins, em Gurupi, Tocantins. Legal. Já estive em Tocantins, em parceria com a Secretaria de Educação. Sim, então o Michel pede também o material, pode deixar, a gente vai mandar tudo. E os slides da abertura do Teaching for Success também. Tá. Os critérios para participar do Teaching for Success. Boa pergunta, Kátia. A gente vai fazer um edital onde a gente faça uma distribuição de vagas de acordo com quantos professores de inglês existem no Brasil todo, para que a gente tenha um grupo que represente o Brasil. Esse é um dos critérios. O outro critério é que a gente quer também ter uma boa distribuição entre professores que atuam nas escolas públicas e nas escolas privadas. Então, a gente vai olhar para o mapa do Brasil e entender como é que é essa proporção, e a proporção no Teaching for Success também vai ser essa. O outro critério muito importante é a participação. A gente vai ter um termo de compromisso de a participação nas atividades do Teaching for Success, que vão ser atividades mediadas. A gente vai ter um tutor, não é um curso autoinstrucional, vão ter sessões ao vivo, que cada um dos tutores vai discutir com o seu grupo, vão ser divididos em grupos de 20 a 30, 20 é o ideal, mas de 20 a 25 professores, e cada tutor vai estabelecer qual é o horário das atividades ao vivo. Então, são esses critérios, mas vai estar tudo explicadinho no edital, Kátia. O curso é online, o Teaching for Success vai ser todo online, não vai ser presencial. Bom, enquanto a gente espera o Graham se conectar conosco, o Graham está no México, e o México é uma caixinha de surpresa. De vez em quando eles têm uns abalos sísmicos, e aí, às vezes, leva um tempinho para a conexão de internet se restabelecer. Enquanto isso, a gente vai assistir o vídeo que eu comentei sobre os professores de Salvador que participaram do Teaching for Success no ano passado. Falo com vocês de novo já já.
A experiência de formação pelo Conselho Britânico foi muito produtiva, porque a gente tem uma crença de que na escola pública é complicado trabalhar a oralidade, trabalhar a parte comunicativa da língua inglesa. O grande lado positivo desse curso foi me fazer pensar na minha prática e inserir outras dimensões de ensino que até então eu já tinha tirado da minha rotina por uma crença limitante, até generalizante, né, de que não daria certo trabalhar a oralidade. Então, desde o primeiro dia de aula, eu já entrei falando inglês. Os comandos, né, para pedir para beber água, para ir ao banheiro, já utilizando a língua. Então, professor, posso ir ao banheiro? In English, please. So, teacher, may I go to the bathroom? Esses comandos é possível fazer, eles gostam de fazer isso. É como se fosse uma palavrinha mágica, alguma coisa assim, um lúdico. Recomendo fortemente que todos façam a formação do Conselho Britânico, porque é, de fato, muito boa, muito produtiva, muito útil, né? A palavra é essa, é útil para o dia a dia.
Muitos alunos hoje têm acesso aos smartphones, porém eles usam assim indiscriminadamente. Aí após o curso eu percebi que eu poderia usar o recurso do meu smartphone mesmo para fazer com que eles tivessem acesso a vídeos, a músicas, e que eles podiam também usar em casa. Eles assistiam em sala de aula, algo que eu tinha a intenção de ensiná-los, e em casa, motivados pela aula, né? Eles sabiam que aquilo dali eles iam encontrar também no YouTube, e aí eles acessavam em casa também. E na aula seguinte eles já vinham, teacher, aquela música, eu vi que tem outra relacionada a ela. Então, o uso do smartphone foi um divisor de águas este ano, né?
Logo quando surgiu a ideia da gente fazer esse curso na plataforma, foi assim maravilhoso. Porque a gente volta, né? Volta a ter contato com coisas mais atuais. Às vezes você teve a formação lá da faculdade, e há quanto tempo você já está em andamento? Eu acredito muito que todo o conhecimento pra gente é válido. Então você em constante formação, os starts vão aparecendo. E aí você, puxa, eu posso usar isso aqui, eu posso usar aquilo. Então, sempre que você traz algo diferente, é outra história. A aula é outra. O clima da sala é outro. E fica legal para todo mundo, né? É maravilhoso para a gente como professor e para eles como estudantes.
E aí, pessoal, gostaram da percepção dos professores que participaram do Teaching for Success? E olha que o Teaching for Success, o curso que eles fizeram no final do ano passado, foi num momento bastante desafiador. Era novembro. Então, eles fizeram um curso de novembro a janeiro, durante as férias escolares. E, enfim, ainda assim, tem essa percepção sobre a experiência de fazer o Teaching for Success. Tem uma pergunta aqui do Lucas sobre estudante acadêmico, se o estudante acadêmico pode participar. Ok, está na faculdade, Lucas. O Teaching for Success ele vai ser voltado para professores. Você é professor? Porque aí eu vou aproveitar e vou trazer um dado sobre o Brasil. Na verdade, nem todos os nossos 172 mil professores de língua inglesa no Brasil são professores com graduação em letras. Né? Na verdade, a gente tem uma demanda no Brasil de mais professores do que nós temos de pessoas formadas em letras ou outra graduação necessária. Então, e isso não é uma realidade só do Brasil, isso é comum no resto do mundo, também acontece que existem professores de outras disciplinas dando a matéria de língua inglesa por vários motivos. Primeiro, a questão da demanda é o ponto mais importante, e segundo, porque existem hoje bastante uso de inglês para ensino de outras disciplinas, né? Como a metodologia, usando a metodologia CLIO. Então, por exemplo, ensino de ciências utilizando inglês. Então, é um professor de ciências que usa o inglês só como um meio de instrução. Então, Lucas, se você é professor de inglês, mesmo você ainda não estando formado pela faculdade, isso não vai ser um impedimento para você participar do Teaching for Success. Sabe por quê? Porque se a gente estivesse fazendo esse tipo de recorte, necessariamente a gente faria um recorte de cerca de 30% só de professores desses 172 mil professores de língua inglesa. Daí a importância de a gente coletar os dados sociodemográficos nos nossos projetos para que eles realmente as atividades, os nossos programas, eles dialoguem com o público local como ele é. Né? Essa é a nossa forma de ser aberto e ter comprometimento com quem está na sala de aula, quem está dando aula de inglês no Brasil. E não é só assim, isso é assim no mundo, tá? É um princípio do British Council, é um dos nossos valores, sermos abertos e comprometidos com as sociedades onde a gente atua e estabelece laços de parceria e de colaboração. Temos mais alguns comentários por aqui, enquanto eu já sei que o Graham está quase chegando, quase entrando aqui conosco. Sim, a gente postou a pedidos, né? O exemplar do The Future of English, ele pode ser baixado pelo nosso link, que está aqui no chat. Ele é gratuito, de acesso gratuito, e, enfim, vale a pena muito ler esse livro. Dá muita inspiração. Que legal. Então, em geral, muito apoio para que a gente garanta a participação do máximo de professores de inglês no Brasil. Eu acho que a gente está com o Graham quase chegando. Eu vou pedir para projetar a apresentação dele em 1 minuto. Enquanto isso, eu vou convidar vocês para se prepararem. Para quem quiser assistir a sessão do Graham totalmente em inglês, para que clique lá em cima no chat, no postzinho azul, e vão para o canal das Américas. A partir de agora, lá vai ter também eu vou chamar o Graham, e aí a sessão vai ser toda em inglês, com tradução simultânea neste canal aqui do Brasil. E então a gente se fala já. 1 minutinho só para a gente fazer a transição dos canais, e a gente já retorna com o Graham Stanley. everyone. So we're back, and now we have a very special session with Graham Stanley, our America's Director for English Programs in British Council. Graham, good morning from Brazil.
Good morning, Brazil. Good morning, Alessandra. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the last day of the ELT Week Brazil.
Yeah, so here we go. I think everyone's gonna feel a bit of saudade. You know, that's yeah. We're gonna miss it, I think. Well, Graham, so now it's with you. I just the last explanation, instruction for our public. We are going to have this live on British Council Brazil, British Council Americas, and on the Ministry of Education's channel. It's going to be fully translated in Portuguese in the Brazilians British Council's channel and in the Ministry of Education, and it's going to be in English with no translation on the British Council Americas channel. Okay, so it's up to you now, Graham.
Okay, thank you very much, Alessandra. Although don't go away because I'm going to involve you in the discussion, as you well know.
Great.
Okay, so everybody, today's session is the plan is to have an interactive workshop. So I'm going to be asking you all to do things on your own, or if you're with another teacher, you can have discussions. I'm going to simulate the discussion part by talking to Alessandra here. So we'll be having a little bit of a discussion. So if you are not with anyone else, then you can always listen to our discussion and put your thoughts and comments into the chat. So we're going to try to make this as interactive as possible. And it's all about this, which Alessandra will now translate into English.
So this is an interactive session, so you can design your own personal plan for professional development, self-evaluating your pedagogical skills for English language teaching.
Wonderful. I think that was a very good translation. Okay, the workshop that I'm going to do today is based on some materials from the British Council's Teaching for Success program, and it's all about understanding professional development. And one thing teachers need to do more of, which is always a good idea, is taking responsibility for your own professional development. So that's what we're going to be doing today, looking at some ideas of how you can do that. And I'm just opening up the chat so I can keep an eye on who's there and what you're saying. So I've got that and one eye on that. So please use that as much as possible as we go through the session. Okay, so as with any workshop, it's important to look at learning outcomes. What are we planning on trying to get us to learn about today? So I'm not going to read all of this, but I will just highlight some of the things on this slide, which is about taking responsibility for professional development. So how can you better, as a teacher, understand your professional needs, interests, and learning preference in order for you to decide what you need to develop on, which is the first stage. And also, the workshop today is about you being aware of, selecting, and engaging in appropriate professional development opportunities and resources to inform your classroom practice. So this is all about you thinking about your own context, what you need in your circumstances with your students in your teaching and learning context, and how you can then create a kind of pathway towards developing professionally. So that's what we're doing today. I'm going to start by looking at some statements about professional development. And I'm going to ask you to, in the chat, tell me whether you think you agree with them, whether this sounds true for you or not, or whether if you have any comments about any of them, then write some comments in the chat as well. And I'm going to ask Alessandra to comment upon what she feels about these statements. So the first statement is this one. I'll read it out just in case people out there prefer to hear it rather than read it. So if you prefer to hear it, then close your eyes. You don't have to read it. And if you prefer to read it, then put your fingers in your ears so you don't have to listen to me, or mute your speakers. So developing professionally is a continuous and individual process of trying to understand ourselves and our practice so that we become the best teachers we can. It involves rethinking and questioning old classroom practices. It may involve a change in attitude and beliefs about teaching and learning. What do you think about that, Alessandra? Is that something that you think resonates with you?
It does a lot. And it's tricky to understand what really is my need, right? I mean, I could have a perception, for example, that I can improve my grammar when I'm writing a document, but you might have a perception as my colleague that I'm doing fine, actually. It would be great if I could work on, I don't know, communication skills, for example. That's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard. I think it sounds hard, but it doesn't have to be. I think if you approach professional development from the point of view of this is going to help you make things, if not easier, more interesting for your life, especially as a teacher. I think a lot of teachers, as they get more experience, they tend to rely upon the same types of activities that they learned, that they know work well, and don't try new things. It's certainly something that I've fallen into that trap in the past. And the problem with that is that sometimes you get a little bit bored, even though the activities work well, you get a little bit bored with doing the same kinds of activities all the time. But also, I think if you're not in touch with changes, and things do change in teaching and learning, then you may fall a little bit out of touch with what is happening that is new. And also there are some exciting activities that you can add to your teacher's toolbox, if we call it as such, that can help the learners and keep things interesting for you. I think that's the other important thing about this. So the second statement, Alessandra.
Graham, hold on just a second. We do have some comments on the chat about statement one. Rafael says he agrees. Marina Martinez says, absolutely. As teachers, we are lifelong learners. Andrea totally agrees. Michael as well also agrees. Everyone agrees.
Well, that's good. We don't have any arguments at the moment. Let's see if the second statement is a bit more controversial. So developing professionally involves both working alone and working with others. Opportunities for professional development can occur anywhere and at any time. While you're working, outside work, in the supermarket, for example, informally and more formally on courses like this. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree as well. I've heard quite sometimes that only 30% of our professional development happens like in formal courses or activities.
Yeah.
70% is related to our working experience and practice, and a lot of very informal conversations and ways that we could always be developing professionally.
Yeah, that's why for teachers, for example, the staff room is such an important thing. If you work in a school with a staff room, it's important to participate in there because you can get an idea, apart from just socially interacting with your colleagues, other teachers, etc. You can get an ideas that people are sharing. Often teachers will come back from a class and they say, that works really well. And then they end up talking just briefly to their colleagues about it. And that's a great way of actually getting new ideas for as a teacher.
Mm-hmm. We have more comments here on the chat,
Sure.
Graham. So Marina mentions we have to adapt to fast changes that happen all the time, like technology, for example. And Katja is mentioning that we need a strategic plan for our own professional development. This is interesting. Nettie mentions that attitude is everything in the learning process. And it's good for me, the fact that she mentions, I haven't been a teacher since the beginning of career, but I'm a specialist. Let's see what else. Marina mentions on regarding this statement specifically, we have to think what has worked and what has not worked, depending on very much on the students, the context, and their interests. And yeah, people are agreeing. The other comment, quite interesting, is only it's 1% of inspiration and 99% of perspiration. Wow.
Yeah, that's quite a comment, isn't it? I think, yeah, it can be a lot of hard work. It takes time and hard work as a teacher to develop professionally. I think the trick is to find out how to make it enjoyable. So this idea that is on the screen, that, you know, do some things on your own, do things with colleagues, think about professional development not as something you do formally when you sit down to a webinar or go to a conference, etc., but it's something that you just keep in mind all the time. Be open to receiving kind of ideas to develop professionally from all aspects of life. So here's the next one. Professional development can take place in a variety of ways. For example, trying to solve problems in your work, trying out new ideas and reflecting on the experience, reading about new ideas, discussion or collaboration with other teachers, taking a course and taking part in a project.
I think I'm going to, I totally agree. I learn with you as my colleague all the time. And Marina mentions here, I learn all the time with my professors, with my students, with my peers. And of course, oh, this is sweet, with the British Council, nice. Right. Katja also mentions that human beings like to live. Oh, her comment is on the other side. She mentions that human beings likes to live in their comfort zone. Interesting, Katja. And Ana Claudia mentions that we live, we learn, and teach. And this is an endless process. Important to take an opportunity to keep working. Patricia brings a comment related to age. This is interesting. She says that etarismo, as we say in Brazil, like this idea that people, the older the people get, less they are able to work. And she mentions that maybe it should be the opposite, because people with the more you live, the more experience you have, and the more context you have to adapt to more learning experience. This is an interesting topic.
That is really interesting. I think that, and what I think Luciana said earlier, is that you can learn from your students. You shouldn't feel that. I don't think any teacher nowadays thinks that, but the idea of being open to learning from your own students about what needs to be doing, not only not only from what they say, but also how they react and do. You can get a lot of information about what you're doing in the classroom from the way that the students participate and react to it. And just by asking them as well, did you like that? Would you like to do more of it? Would you like to do something else? Because as has been mentioned earlier, I think, you know, the more you enjoy what happens in the classroom, the more the students will get out of it, and the more your life will be enjoyable as a teacher as well, which is part of the thing. The last one, Alessandra, an important part of the process of developing professionally is becoming aware of or noticing what you do in the classroom. Without this noticing, it is difficult to make any change.
True, but how can we notice what's happening in our classroom if we are part of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you can do it in several ways. One is you take time during the actual class to actually ask directly students what they think. But also, there's a lot of information. You'd be surprised, even though teachers are very busy trying to, right, I'm doing this now, thinking about the next stage, trying to evaluate how the students are speaking or how they are. You get information from students' body language and how else they behave in the classroom about what you're doing. You can pick up if they're bored, you can pick up if they're excited about an activity, you can pick up lots of information. So this is what is noticing, really. That's what that's all about.
We have a comment here. I think I'm going to go back to that, to your ideas, but we have a very interesting comment from Lucas. I have the feeling that he might be a private English teacher, and he is preparing. He mentioned just a while ago that he's still doing his graduation course. So he asked, could you elaborate a little more about working collaboratively with teachers? Yeah,
I think it's a very interesting question, Lucas, so thank you for that. I think as teachers, there's a tendency to for us to go into the school and to go into our classrooms, to close the door, and we're on our own with our students, teaching them. And that can be, it's nice to have that sort of sense of having a kind of a closed space where, you know, students can be encouraged to participate and to take risks. You know, learning a language, speaking a language can be an uncomfortable situation for a lot of people. They don't feel very confident doing it. So having that closed space of the classroom is what makes things work in a lot of times, and building this community, the supportive community where the students can speak or, you know, be a little bit more vulnerable that they would be able to be outside in the cruel world, is part of what the classroom is. However, if you don't allow that collaboration with other teachers in the school, I really feel very strongly about this. I think you're kind of missing part of what the educational experience is. There's a reason why teachers are not just in a classroom on their own, and that we're all working together with other teachers in other classrooms in a school with a staff room. And this idea of creating a school atmosphere, whatever your situation is, whether it's public or private, whether it's a language academy, whether it's a big school or a small school, I think it's important just to share knowledge, experience, ideas with other teachers. Now, you can take this a step further. You can actually, and I'll speak a little bit about this very soon, you could actually observe other teachers. You can do peer observation. So you can actually, if it's suitable, if the time is right, you can actually go and arrange a peer observation, and you can support a teacher when they're having a particular issue or problem. Or you can go and observe a teacher that you know does something very well, that you can learn from that teacher. And that's one of the most valuable professional development opportunities that you can have, is actually to go and learn from another teacher by observing them. Now, it's difficult for teachers to allow that observation to happen. We do feel kind of nervous when we have our peers or sometimes our managers observing us. But if you can get over that, and I think it's an important thing to do, then there's so much you can learn from that. Likewise, if you video classrooms. So if you have permission, or if you just video yourself teaching and not the students, for example, which means you wouldn't need permission from the students probably, but then you can learn a lot by watching yourself teach, or by giving that video to another teacher so they can see how you teach something, because it's something that is unusual. We don't normally get that opportunity to watch other teachers. It's a special thing. And the most valuable professional opportunity of professional development opportunities I've ever had in my life as a teacher has been when I watched myself teaching on a video. And there was a before and after to my teaching that was very distinct. It was one of the most dramatic things it was very difficult to do, but it was very valuable. And then also watching other teachers, observing other teachers teach, you get to understand just the variety and the different techniques and things that work, things that don't work so well, etc. So I definitely recommend it. I think I'm going to move on, Alessandra. You can pick up on some of the comments, but I think we're going to run out of time if we don't move on. So what comments are there?
No, I think you covered everything. I mean, with that last mention.
Okay, great. So just one last bit about this, and then we'll talk about something else. So here's a process that is a good thing to keep in mind to develop professionally. So what we talked about before, there isn't any particular place where you can start. It's like a circle here. Noticing, seeing familiar things in different ways. So be open to trying to pick up information about what's happening in your classroom when you're teaching, to notice things through the behavior of the students, so their reaction, etc., is really important. Understanding then a new way of seeing things. So with that information that you get from noticing, is there anything you can do differently? Making sense of the new learning and the implications for teaching in your own context. So are you going to take that information and teach in a different way, applying the new ideas in your practice, and then reflecting what you've done and changed, and then we're back to noticing again. If you make a change in your classroom, be open to understanding, has it improved things? Are things better? Are the students reacting in a better way, etc., etc.? So that's the cycle, the process of developing professionally. Right. Now, I was going to do this and ask you to answer these questions, but I think I'm going to move on because we'll probably not get any further. So, but these are quite interesting questions that maybe I can ask the participants today to pick one and write an answer in the chat, and we can pick up on it. So here's some questions that are quite interesting to reflect with. What were the turning points in your career as a teacher? Who has influenced you as a teacher? What courses have you attended that were important to you? Are there any books or other resources that have influenced you? And what other kinds of experience have supported your professional development? If you want everybody to put something in the chat, then we'll definitely pick up on some of those comments and discuss them. But I'm going to move on. So, understanding professional development. Here are 3 statements about professional development from teaching professionals. And again, in the chat, which of these 3 statements resonates most with you? Which of them are most important or most speak to you more directly? I'm going to ask you to read them, Alessandra, and just say which of these three you think is the most important. Meanwhile, I will say that I like B. I think this idea of learning from others, for example, from in-service training courses, from conferences. I'm a conference junkie. I love conferences. I love going to meet people. And it's not just about the input I get from the conference sessions, but it's actually all of the people you meet in between the conference sessions. That's a face-to-face conference, of course, and publications. And I do try to keep up with what's been written about teaching and learning languages as well. What about you?
Let me see here. So A, you have within your own teaching routine the main tools for professional progress, your own experience and your reflections on it, interaction with other teachers in your institutions. Teacher development takes place when teachers working as individuals or in groups consciously take advantage of such resources to forward their own professional learning. Okay, so that's A. B, we can go on learn from others, for example, in service training courses, from conference, from new and old publications. However, the idea that we should go on taking ideas from others and applying them to your own situation is only part of the story. To support your own development, we need a way of working that encourages us to look more closely at ourselves and to work on what we find, okay? And C, learning doesn't have to stop when you leave college or university. Lifelong learning means exactly that, a process of learning or reflective practice that continues throughout your life. This is very interesting. I would go with C myself. Just to bring on a funny situation, I finished my second master diploma very pregnant. I mean, like almost giving birth. And
not because of the masters, I hope.
Oh, sorry?
You weren't pregnant because of the masters.
No. My husband came to me in kind of a desperate situation, very nervous that I was up and about, very, very, very pregnant. And he said, if you haven't learned anything up to now, can you please give up? Sorry, haven't. I would go with C. Some answers here on the chat.
Yeah, I've got one here actually. Katia Cordeiro in, excuse my accent, Chao Benito de Una, Pernambuco. Teachers gather every month to talk, share ideas, present successful projects and build new projects together, all in partnership with each other. That sounds like a very healthy situation, doesn't it, Alessandra?
Super. There's also some comments on in Paraíba, the teachers also get together once a month. So yeah.
Yeah, and one more, I think, from Nicole Machado. The turning point was when she got feedback from the coordinator. It helped so much that it was about being able to watch someone watching me. So I think it's that idea of observation. Observation doesn't have to be something to be afraid of. I think it's something that we can really learn from. So let's move on. So I'm going to look at a case study to reflect upon, everybody. This is a teacher in China called Jenny. And one aspect of professional development, as it says on the screen, is that you need to be willing to change. So you need to be open and willing to change and ready to see opportunities for development, however they occur. And we're going to look at this story of Jenny to show that happening. And this is a statement, a real statement from a real teacher, who is a primary school teacher in China, and she's reflecting on what she's learned and some of the changes she's made through the teaching due to not only taking the course, but relating the course she was taking and trying to understand her own classroom context, which is what is needed really. You need to not just do the course and learn about things theoretically, but try and apply whatever your learning is to the classroom. So let's look at stage one, and I'm going to ask you to answer the questions, Alessandra. So one topic which I really found very interesting on the course was conditions for children's learning. Before I went on the course, I always thought that children in China don't have a good environment for learning English. Although it's China, it could be anywhere really, because the language of everyday life is Chinese. Children have no idea why they're using English. I think that will resonate with teachers in Brazil as well. They don't need to use English with their friends or families. Even in school, they don't speak English much, just a few words and phrases. Michelle, my best learner, has graduated from class 6 and still can't communicate with me. So I firmly believe that children can't learn a foreign language successfully if they don't have the right environment. And I think a lot of that kind of statement is said by a lot of people, sometimes language learners, but also sometimes teachers who say, no, to learn a language, you need to go to the country where it's spoken. You can't learn it in a classroom. So that, I think, this idea of having the right environment is what Jenny's putting here. Now, the first question for you, Alessandra, is what idea did Jenny focus on in the in-service course?
Conditions for children's learning, I guess, but actually in her speech, she focused a lot on the problem, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. So the topic that she found interesting in the course was conditions for children's learning. So what needs to be in place for children to learn a language? What kind of conditions? What environment? And she was reflecting upon her own, she was looking at that and reflecting on her own classroom situation, saying, yes, because I can see the children I teach are not learning as much as I'd hoped. And probably it's because of this non-English environment. So what did she become aware of in her own teaching? I think we've just answered that question. So let's move on to the next one. So part 2 of Jenny's story is this. But after learning about this topic, I changed my ideas. I learned that different countries and situations have different conditions which affect children's language learning. Maybe in China, children get less exposure and less time for English, but I can't say children cannot learn English at all in China, because even here, some children do manage to learn successfully. If teachers feel the situation is not so good for learning, then they have a responsibility to change it. They can create the right conditions in their classroom. That's the point. That idea was really significant for me. It gave me confidence in my teaching career and encouraged me to see what I can do to create a good learning environment. So the question for you, Alessandra, is what new understanding did Jenny develop as a result of the course?
I guess she looked at which part of that problem that she could have some control on tackling, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, so it was that. It's like, okay, although what I've learned about the conditions that are necessary for learning English, I can do something. I can change something in my classroom to make those conditions more, so that those conditions are better to encourage language learning. That's what she decided, I think. And the part 3, the final part, so after the course, I went back, determined to try to improve the learning environment. It hasn't been easy, but now I use more English in the classroom. I do more oral activities where children need to speak. I brought a foreign visitor into the classroom to talk to the children. Last summer, I asked the headmaster and local authority if we could have an English camp in the summer, where we did lots of activities in English with children and tried to use only English. It was really successful. Doing all these things with my learners since I came back has increased my confidence. I really feel that I can make a difference now and feel more in control of my situation. One of my friends told me that she thought I seemed more confident these days. So, how has Jenny applied her understanding, Alessandra?
Yeah, so she created the conditions as much as she could. And this reminds me of the video that we just watched before we started from a teacher from Salvador that did the Teaching for Success. And he realized he could use more make the children need to speak in English with very simple asks like, can I have water? Can I go to the toilet, etc. So that I think that's quite the same.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's move on. So I'm not going to focus on that, but I think the idea of maybe anyone out there who wants to can say whether they relate to any of the ideas in Jenny's story, whether that is something that they've also learned, like you just spoken about the teacher who took the course. And can anyone out there identify a process that can lead to positive change in the classroom, the process involved in professional development? So if any of you want to comment upon that, that would be fine. Are there any more comments or questions in the chat?
There's a lot, many, but there's already a comment from Marina about this. She mentioned that it's important for the teacher to be aware of their own beliefs and understand how these beliefs sometimes limit our practice. Also, interesting. Nelly mentions that maybe Jenny got some resources to do to do events as well. So to create this environment, this welcoming and maybe more a fun environment.
Right. Before I move on, Alessandra, I'm just going to check how we're doing for time. Should I skip some parts or have we got plenty of time?
About if we stretch it for 30 minutes, since it's going to be recorded, if someone can't keep up with us, stay with us all the time, they could go back to the recording later. 30 minutes is good?
That's good for me if it's good for you and everyone else.
Yeah, it's okay.
I think there are some interesting bits that are worth talking more about in detail, including these. So let's have a look at some professional development tools. So it's not just about going to a webinar, going to a face-to-face training. There are a lot of other things you can do, as I hope that you already we've already talked about some of them, but let's have a look at some more. So I want you, Alessandra, to tell me whether each of these paragraphs is either A or B. So I'll read them out. So is this number one? And in the chat, you can write in the answers as well about it, talking about a teaching diary or action research. After each lesson, make notes of what you learned about your learners, yourself, your teaching, and the English language. List simple goals for yourself, such as trying group work or pair work.
I think it's a teaching diary.
Yeah, teaching diary. Number two, the staff room is a great resource. It's full of teachers with ideas that you can borrow or try with your classes. You can also work together to plan lessons and share ideas and experiences.
B now, collaborating with colleagues.
Exactly. What I mentioned before about the importance of a staff room. If you work online, then you need to do something to replace that atmosphere. Number three, this is good if you don't want someone to watch your class at first, or it should be if it's difficult to find time when someone can watch when you teach. The teacher tells the observer, a colleague, about the lesson they're going to teach and describes one or two areas they want to improve, for example, instructions. They then teach the lesson without the observer. After the lesson, the two colleagues give feedback, paying attention to those one or two areas.
Wow, got me there. I'm confused. I'm not sure, but
Right.
maybe peer observation. But
No, it's blind observation. The reason why it's blind observation is because it's something that you don't need someone to actually observe your class. So sometimes it's called an unobserved observation. So the words it's a curious thing, because normally you would think an observation is when you have someone observing your class. But if it's a blind observation, and what you have is that you tell someone, normally when you have an observation, you would talk to someone who is observing you about what you're going to do. So that's a pre-observation. And you have a discussion, and the person listens and maybe gives you some ideas or feedback, or perhaps you could think about that. So that goes ahead with a blind observation. Then what happens is that you do the class and you think about what you talked about when you talk to your colleague about the observation. Then as soon as after the class as you can, you go back to the colleague and you tell them, okay, this is what happened when I imagine it's because you want to try something new. This is what happened. And you tell them, and your colleague gives you suggestions, and you could tell your colleague, this didn't go so well, this went well, blah, blah, blah. And your colleague gives you information. It's a very useful thing to do, because normally you don't think deeply about what you're going to teach, as deeply about what you're going to teach. So this is an opportunity for you to actually focus upon one particular lesson, one particular set of students, and get advice from a colleague, even though they're not actually physically in the classroom observing with you. And it's helpful if it's difficult for maybe you're teaching with colleagues who are teaching at the same time, so you can't observe each other's classes. So this is an opportunity to do it. It's a very interesting thing to do. I recommend teachers try it out. Okay, next one, plan and teach a lesson with another teacher. Decide who's going to teach which part of the class. This is a great way to learn about different ways of teaching from each other.
I was looking at the chat.
You're not paying attention, Alessandra.
Oh my God, I have.
Bad student.
Okay, so tell me the answer.
Team teaching. So teaching with another teacher. And again, it's a very interesting thing to do. It's an unusual thing to do, but if you get the opportunity to try it out, I recommend it. Next one, choose a topic that interests you, do some research and plan what you want to say to your colleagues, give teachers ideas for activities to use in class.
I love this one, community practice.
No.
Oh my God.
It's giving a workshop. So a community of practice would be probably, it's related to that. So it's a distractor, that answer. So a community of practice would be doing that, but on an ongoing basis. So this is just one-off workshop. You choose something you're interested in, you research and plan it, and then give the teachers ideas for how to use it. So it's a workshop. Number 6, let's see if you can get this one right. You can meet in person or online to exchange teaching tips, share resources, compare experiences, and work on projects together. The community can be just 2 people or as many as you like.
Ooh, community practice?
Yes, the key is the community word in the answer and the text. That's the community of practice, which I know you're a fan of, and I am too. And the last one, read about your profession in teaching journals, books, online articles, and books. Which one's that?
That's easy, reading.
Yeah, that was an easy one. So in the chat, if you want to say which ones of these, maybe there's 2 questions here, which of what we've talked about you think you have done and find interesting? And if you get the opportunity to write why, write why. And then which of them you perhaps haven't done but would like to try. So write that in the chat and we can pick up on some of your answers. Actually, there's a few more, but I'm not going to go over them. I'm going to move on. So once you have kind of decided what you want to develop on, then it's a good idea to write a plan for what you want to do. So before doing any kind of professional development activity, and I think someone said that in the chat earlier, so to kind of structure your professional development. I can't remember who it was who said it, but you definitely mentioned that earlier, Alessandra, and I think it's a very good idea. The idea of doing it for a reason and having a plan is a good idea. It doesn't have to be very long. This is an example of a teacher. And what I want you to do, Alessandra, is tell me what you think of this. Is there enough detail? Do you think the decisions that this teacher has decided to do are good, or could be different, or could be better? So this teacher has decided that they want to develop on the area of motivation, which is key when it comes to learning a language. And the focus the teacher is specializing on is the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So the difference between when someone is motivated because they want to do it, that's the intrinsic motivation, or extrinsically because they're getting something out of it, like an exam result that they need to go on to university, for example. That's a good example of extrinsic motivation. That's the only reason why they're learning it, but could be a combination of intrinsic and extrinsic. And the goals the teacher has is to improve the learner's motivation in class. And the rationale is that the learners often seem uninterested in my lessons and only want to get through the test, so they're extrinsically motivated. They have poor learning skills. I want to try to promote more active involvement and enjoyment in learning English. So the teacher thinks, quite rightly, I think, that the learners will learn more if they're intrinsically motivated than if they're just extrinsically motivated. It's okay wanting a result of a test. We all need qualifications and test results, but I think it's not enough just to do it, and it could be quite not very enjoyable if you're just extrinsically motivated and you're learning something and you don't learn as well. So the plan is to research the subject by reading and discuss with colleagues, try out the ideas I learn, get feedback from my learners on the ideas I try out. And the teacher thinks one academic term is enough for her to be able to do that well. What do you think of this plan, Alessandra? Do you like it? Is it lacking detail? Is there other things the teacher could do?
I miss having some kind of a deadline, until when do I start, when do I finish, so I can see if the plan worked, maybe.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think just setting a random time, like a term, is probably not enough, isn't it? It's like spend more time on it if there seems to be more opportunities to learn more, and less time if it seems like they've learned enough. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you. Let's look at a second plan. And thank you, Michelle Roli, who says an excellent planner. I'm glad you like it, Michelle. Okay, the next one is this teacher has decided on looking at speaking activities. And the focus is on how to incorporate more speaking activities into my lessons. The goal is to help my learners improve their speaking skills. The rationale, my learners find speaking in English very difficult, and my lessons often focus more on reading and writing tasks from the course book. I'd like to find out ways of giving them more opportunity to speak in class. And the teacher intends to look at online resources and talk to my colleagues, observe one of my colleagues who uses a lot of speaking activities and reflect on their lesson, try out some of their ideas in my class, write down my reflections in a journal, get my colleagues to observe me and give feedback. And the teacher is planning to spend 1 month on this. What do you think about that?
I think that one is more specific than the last one.
Do you?
I do. No?
I think the opposite.
Wow.
For example, I think speaking activities is too broad. There, what kinds of speaking activities? Not very specific. So I disagree with you. Sorry, but that's why we're having this discussion.
Exactly. That's the point.
Yeah. So, however, I do think the rationale and the action are specific. So I'll definitely give you that. But I think what kind of speaking, I would like to see more detail on that. So, speaking could be making presentations, is speaking in a monologue? Is it conversations? It's being able to present? Is it being able to just speak together informally? Is it formally? Is it speaking to someone in a situation like a shop or an airport or whatever? Or I think it's very general, and I think it would be interesting for this teacher to understand more about what the learners want to speak, what would help the learners, what their context is, how they might use speaking. For example, if teaching teenagers, maybe the learners already have exposure to playing online games where they get the opportunity to speak to people in English, but they don't do it because they're nervous. So the teacher could actually, if they knew about that, and this is a real opportunity for learners to learn these days with something they love, and to encourage that kind of speaking and giving them some support and advice of what they can say would be useful, as an example.
Yeah, true. Very interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, we can agree to disagree.
Absolutely.
So let's come to something that I talked more in detail about earlier in the week. So there is another presentation recording that you can go back to if you want to learn more about this, but I'm going to focus on it because I think it's very, very important. It's a very, very useful tool for teachers to use. And this is a framework for teachers. This is the British Council's framework. There are other frameworks that other people have developed, but although I'm biased because I work for the British Council, I do think this is the best framework that I've seen. And I say that as someone who's used and looked at a lot of different frameworks. So I'm a big fan of this.
Brilliant. Just so you know, just in the closing sessions before, I went through all the skills in Portuguese, but what I didn't do that I'm sure you're going to do is show how to use it.
Okay, so then I won't spend much time on this, but because we've already done it. So I'll just very briefly say that you went through how it's made up, the 12 professional practices and the 4 what are they called? The 4 levels of awareness.
I haven't went through the 4 levels of awareness.
Okay, so the idea of this circle is that we've divided up, as Alessandra's probably said, into 12 professional practices, what teachers should know. And this is based on research. But the idea of where you are in this, using this framework, is if you're on the outer rim of the circle, then it's with each of the professional practices or any of the professional practices, then you just become aware of a particular practice. So for example, if you're a new teacher, you probably don't have much experience managing the lesson. Classroom management is something that takes a lot of practice. So it's likely that this is something that you maybe feel that you're aware of, but you need to develop. However, if you're a more experienced teacher, it's typical that you will have a lot of experience, a lot of strategies and ways of doing classroom management. And so you'll be nearer the center of the circle. So that's how it works. And in between, you have understanding engagement. If you click on integration, then you're confident enough about a particular professional practice that you could probably teach other teachers to do it. or you could advise other teachers to do it. So that's how that works. I'm not going to say any more about it. You've talked about this. These are the professional practices, and there's more information about each of the professional practices on a link that we can share later about Teaching for Success. So you can download more information about this. These are the professional practices that you've already mentioned, Alessandra, and the 4 stages of development that I've just mentioned. So this is really a place to start. And I know there's another way of doing this. So this is something you can download as a teacher and you can fill in yourself. And you would mark on the circle with a pen, if you print it out, where you are. And then you can look at it and you can see, oh, I'm quite weak there. I think I should develop these next. And you can then decide which areas you want to develop. So it's a visual aid. And it's something that you can keep coming back to. You can do it again after you've developed something, and you can see how your professional development shape changes. You know, and if you're an expert teacher, then you'll end up with a lot more near a smaller circle, near the smaller circle. If you're beginner or inexperienced or need a lot of development, then you would be have a bigger circle, really. So that's how it works.
Mm-hmm. Really, really interesting. We are going to have it also on our site for downloading, and we might even have a translated version.
Wonderful. So that brings us towards the end. Now, I know you're going to talk about another way of doing this, of doing this self-assessment. We're going to be organizing, and you're going to be talking about it in a minute, which is the SAT, the self-assessment test. So this is similar to it. This is something that teachers can do on their own, and the self-assessment test is meant for an organization like the British Council or a ministry or a school to be able to give to teachers so they can get a compilation of results and then decide what kind of training to organize based on what is needed the most. And you'll talk about this in a minute. But before we do that, I want to encourage everybody to reflect on today's session. Remember the ideas in the learning outcomes that we wanted to make lots of different opportunities for professional development, to make you aware of those and to make you aware of how you can take more responsibility for your own professional development. And I hope that we've done that. But you tell us. So I'll ask Alessandra, and others can write in the chat. Alessandra, what have you learned from today? Being with me today.
For sure, I think one interesting, a very specific point was about the blind observation. And I have noticed that there are comments on the chat that people are, whoa, even Raquel Ribeiro is with us here. And she said she tried basically everything, but she was curious with the blind observation. That was news for me too.
There's always something, no matter how much experience you have, and I know Raquel has a lot of experience, there's always something new you can learn. Everyone can learn something new from doing this professional development. Next question. Is there anything that still puzzles you, Alessandra?
Something that puzzles me.
The answer could be no, it's okay.
No, actually, I do. There is something. When we looked at the 2 plants, and I thought the second one was quite good because their actions were very detailed and they had a smaller time frame. And then I realized that this links to something that I'm quite good at. I'm good at action, but sometimes I lack the understanding of the problem and the objective in a broader way. And that's why you said no for that one. So this puzzles me. How can I get better on the strategy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the best way is making sure you reflect with other colleagues. So what helps me get better at things that I think I need more time and attention on, that I'm not good at, or that I just need to develop more, is to find is to identify someone I work with who's good at it. And actually, when I plan on doing something, to actually use them as a soundboard of, is this, that's why whatever you're doing, if you have the opportunity to show it to colleagues and get their feedback on it, it's good. So I have a few colleagues that whatever the work is that I'm doing, and this, if you're planning something for the classroom, this is appropriate as well. And then you show them it, and what do you think? Is there something missing? Is that the right way to do things? Ask questions. And I think everyone should find that colleagues are very generous with their time and knowledge and advice. And it's good to do. You can learn a lot that way. So I would recommend you identifying someone you think is good at it.
I think I found it. Marina has a comment that's quite nice. She says that what her basic insight is taking responsibility for her own learning.
Yeah, I think as teachers, we need to do that. I think we can't wait for the organization where we work to provide professional development for us. I think quite often, for various reasons, they might struggle in providing exactly what you want, what you need at that particular time. So this idea of just in time, which I think comes from industry, but is actually really important when it comes to education. So the idea of you need professional development about particular subjects just in time. So it's no point in you receiving some training about something that you haven't experienced in the classroom or don't want to try out in the classroom. But if you get training about something that, or if you develop yourself or find out yourself about something that you're particularly interested in, perhaps you're teaching a group of teenagers and there's a particular difficulty in getting them to speak. So what you need are strategies to be able to encourage them to speak and motivate them to speak at that moment, not a year ago or not 2 months later, but at the moment that you actually need to solve that problem in the classroom. So this idea of just in time, you can take responsibility for your own professional development, for your own learning, and act on it and try and find out about it. You don't need to wait for someone to tell you about it. Next question. Only 2 more left, I think, Alessandra, and then we can move on to your bit. Has anything made you think differently today about an aspect of teaching and learning or professional development?
I think what I just comment on it made me understand a bit about my strengths and where I can work on and improve. I thought it was a good planner.
Excellent. And then, are you going to reflect on anything that you've learned about today or investigate anything further?
The same, I guess. I do have some comments here on the chat. Seems like when they reflect on the skills that they would prefer to develop, there's quite some questions about class management.
Yeah, classroom management is that huge area that every teacher struggles with. And it doesn't matter how much experience you have, because every single group, as every teacher knows, is different in some way. The dynamics are different. The children are different, for example. And it includes motivation. It includes the way you seat the children, what they're learning, why they're learning, their context, what's happening outside of the classroom, outside at school, their family background, the social aspect of things in the country. So all these dynamics come together and affect your classroom, how you need to adjust classroom management. So you really you could spend your whole life focusing on classroom management and still find something to learn. So what's fascinating about teaching and learning, I think, doesn't matter how much you do it, there's always something more you can learn. Right.
Yeah, I was going to just mention that there is also some interest on multilingualism in English teaching. We had a huge sessions yesterday with Amy about this, but
Yeah.
it's still something that I think that our public in Brazil would be interested. But you can move on.
It's a whole another course you could do on that, but it is a fascinating subject. So over to you, Alessandra, about this exciting new opportunity that the British Council is going to offer to Brazil English teachers.
Okay. So I guess we kind of started. The objective is to hear the voices of the Brazilian teachers, so we could design the teaching for success that I mentioned just before this session, that we're going to have in the beginning of next year, from February to April. And the framework starts with a self-assessment. So we are going to invite you to take part in the self-assessment. So the framework that Graham showed, we are going to put it in a platform, and we are going to ask you to answer the questions. But we tried this already. We tested it in Salvador with the Prefeitura, the city council, and I'm going to show you a video of how it works.
Teaching for Success é a arquitetura de formação continuada para professores de língua inglesa. Eles refletem sobre as suas fortalezas e sobre os pontos de desenvolvimento e podem desenhar o seu próprio mapa pessoal de desenvolvimento profissional. Essa dinâmica permite que tenhamos dados a partir da voz dos professores e assim a gente consegue identificar quais são os próximos passos de desenvolvimento do projeto.
Nosso encontro hoje proporcionou a possibilidade de desenvolver habilidades e competências no processo de ensino e aprendizado de língua inglesa para os nossos alunos de Salvador, Bahia.
The sound is not too good. You could
Yes.
just stop
Sorry.
the video. Yeah. No, don't worry. We're gonna have this video on the website, but I can go through it here. You can just jump the next video as well, skip it as well. So I can just explain. You are able to use a laptop or even a phone. It's gonna take about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how much you think about the answers. Our suggestion is that you download the Teaching for Success framework, so you can take notes while you answer it online. You can also take your own notes about which level of awareness that you have for each one of the skills. And we're going to collect this information all around Brazil. We're going to divide it in 5 questionnaires, one for each one of the regions, so we understand what are the skills needs and what are you telling us that you would like to have in the Teaching for Success next year. To get information about how this is going to work, we're going to release the links in September, and you can follow us on social media. There's all of our social medias here. And I already know that a lot of people that registered for ELT Week, they preferred Instagram rather than Facebook. This was a surprise, but I mean, it was huge access through Instagram. So just follow us on Instagram if you prefer. And you could also subscribe to our newsletter so you can get the information, and you could tell us, what would you like to have in Teaching for Success next year? That's an invitation.
Wonderful. And it's very interesting to know what teachers prefer. I think in Brazil, there is this preference for Instagram, isn't there?
All right. So I guess that's it, Graham.
Yeah, if anybody would like to contact me, then please reach out. My email is on the address there. And if you would like to know more about what Alessandra was talking about, the SAT, etc., then her email is there as well. Please get in touch. Thank you, Alessandra, for being my discussion partner today. Thank you to everybody for listening to us and for all your wonderful comments and questions in the chat. And thank you to all of our support team, the interpreters, the production team, etc. Would you like to thank anyone else, Alessandra?
Well, everyone, actually. There's so many people behind the screens, so many people. I mean, a lot of colleagues from the British Council. We also have support for the chat from our ELT consultants from Troika. And for more information, just come back to the recordings, check out the chat where we have the information to download Teaching for Success, to answer the form if you're interested in becoming a teacher educator or to knowing more about the career, about the certificate. So everything's here on the chat. All the sessions, including this one, is going to be stay recorded and available until 15th September. And I think that's it, Graham. And that's the end of ELT Week Brazil 2023. And thank you, everyone, for all your participation on the chat. It was amazing. It was really nice to be actually working and learning with you here. Graham, thanks so much for joining.
Pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.